Natasha and CEE for this opportunity. As one of the board of trustees on the board of trustees for CEE, very familiar with the TEP program and really excited to be a part of this. The first chance I've had to engage with a group like this. So thank you for this opportunity. As has been mentioned, I myself was an RSI attendee back in 1988 as a junior in high school. So I've been in the shoes of where a lot of your students were, and I know personally the benefit of some of these very engaged and innovative teaching opportunities. So thank you all for bringing that into classrooms, and thank you for showing interest. I think you're all on summer break, right? But you're still doing your job actually being here. So that's impressive. And 30 years ago, I would have been a student saying thank you, because I was the equivalent of something like the U.S. Biology Olympiad way back. Okay, so thank you. What I'm hoping to do today here is share a little bit of my experience, tie together some of the stuff you've already heard from David and Misha about where the technology is going in some of these fields, but bring it up to that national, governmental, international, the security level and the intelligence and national security side, which has become my career. I don't have mating fruit flies. I don't have virtual reality goggles for you, but I want to make this a little bit of a dialogue. You're welcome to actually ask questions during it. We'll also have Q&A at the end. You're welcome to ask whatever questions you want. Please forgive me if I can't answer some of them. I'll do my best to give a useful response, but the last 16 years of my life have largely been classified work, okay? But we've tried to get a lot of those key themes out to the public and to industry, because cybersecurity isn't going to get solved by my government or any government. Okay, and that was one of the really big things in my last 5 years as the National Intelligence Officer. So, who am I and what have I been doing? I'm an international lawyer by training, but a science geek at heart. I was one of the very few people in my undergraduate institution who was studying poli-sci, but taking organic chemistry, multivariable calculus, and astrophysics as electives. My roommates thought I was nuts, and it wasn't until I learned so much great bio from RSI and groups that it wasn't until my senior year that my pre-med roommates weren't coming to me for their bio homework. And as I'm patting myself on the shoulder, that's patting teachers like you and CEE on the shoulder. That's my background. But I'm an international lawyer and a strategist. So I used to work at a place called the National Intelligence Council, and I had the cyber portfolio. This is about me, so the 2 cents I'll give you, I was the lead cyber intelligence advisor to the Director of National Intelligence and intern to the White House and Congress. I'll leave it there, but where I'm coming from is national level and international engagement. What does all this mean? So, every year, the Director of National Intelligence in January or February gives a briefing to Congress called the Worldwide Threat Assessment. It occurs in open, and then there's a closed session. The open session you can actually go find on C-SPAN or on YouTube, and you can find the written statements for the record. I'm going to read you a quote or two from this year's. But what is it? It's actually the Director of National Intelligence pointing out what are the most urgent and strategic national security threats to the United States of America, and officially delivering that to Congress. For the last 4 years running, cyber has been the first topic addressed. And that's not alphabetical, because Africa and counterterrorism would have come first. In consultation with the director and with the other senior leaders in the intelligence community, we decided that cyber had to be first. Why did we say that? Number one, cyber is a huge national security threat in its own right. When you think about critical information systems, foreign criminal, foreign extremist, foreign nation-state threats to them. But these digital technologies are also what every other national security threat is using to prosecute its own interests. How many of you know that narco-traffickers on the southern border set up their own proprietary mobile cell phone networks? Their own cell towers, okay? If you are, unfortunately, engaging in activity with ISIS, you're probably getting instructions on social media or doing financing through digital technologies, operational security, communications. I could go down the list, whether it's nuclear proliferation, terrorism, other criminal activity that's of a national security concern. All of it leverages these digital technologies. That's why we kept saying cyber was first, because it's the core, it's the means to all of your other concerns, and it's a huge problem in its own right. We had a change in 2016 though. The title for that first section switched from cyber to cyber and technology. Myself and the National Intelligence Officer for Technology made a proposal to Director Clapper in the fall of 2015 to actually focus on technology. And the pitch we made, which he in consultation with others ended up accepting, was that the change that is going to be coming in the next 24 to 36 months will make everything you've seen so far pale in comparison. A lot of people talk about the information age is upon us, and they talk about what's already happening, how much life has changed. When the strategic forecasters look at it, they're looking at an exponential curve, and we are just about to hit the knee for the really upward slope in that curve. Let me read you what the very opening of this testimony was in February 2016. Sorry, strategic outlook. The consequences of innovation and increased resilience on information technology in the next few years on both our society's way of life in general and how we in the intelligence community specifically perform our mission will probably be greater in scope and impact than ever. Devices designed and fielded with minimal security requirements and testing and an ever-increasing complexity of networks could lead to widespread vulnerabilities in civilian infrastructures and U.S. government systems. These developments will pose challenges to our cyber defenses and operational tradecraft, but also create new opportunities for our own intelligence collectors. Now, as you can imagine, this is the unclassified version, so in a classified discussion, there's going to be more meat on those bones, but the message you should be getting, this is the first thing the Director of National Intelligence wanted to tell Congress. The changes that are coming in technology innovation are going to change your society and our national security apparatus in ways never before. Here's the next thing you wouldn't expect in an intelligence briefing to Congress. Here are the section headers. I'm not going to read you for this whole presentation. The next section headers: Internet of Things, Artificial Intelligence, Foreign Data Science, Augmented Reality and Virtual Reality. Thank you, Misha. We already got a hint at some of those technologies. And then we move into integrity of information infrastructure. You know what happened a day or two after this was delivered? Director of National Intelligence gets a call from MIT with a group explaining that technology is not a threat to the United States. We absolutely agree. But as a strategic analyst, there's nothing the U.S. government is going to do about these technology trends. They're doing research on their own and funding research, but it's not something we in the national security community can choose to stop or to limit. This is happening. The question is, how do you deal with it? And that's what this discussion was about. So, let me take a few of those topics. Internet of Things. Everyone knows what IoT is. I know we have biologists. I know we have others here. If I'm saying something that you absolutely don't know, or if I use an abbreviation, please raise your hand so we can all stay part of the conversation. With Internet Protocol version 6, and with the Internet of Things and mobile and wireless technologies, everything is going to be soon coming online. You see the Cisco ads with the cat in the kitchen and its collar and the milk in the fridge, and is the orange juice going to tattle on the milk that the milk is expired, and is the refrigerator going to call the grocery store to have fresh milk delivered in a driverless Google car? It's a good ad, it's fun. That is coming. And you're going to see that 24 to 36 months as your daily life. Okay? Not everyone, but that is where those up to speed with where the technology is will be. What does that imply? Systemically speaking, the Internet of Things changes the entire framework of how information is collected, aggregated, processed, and acted upon. In the old telecommunications and data-centric models, think of a wheel, the hub and spoke, information came into the center and was processed. Where you're trying to go with smart devices on the grids and Internet of Things is to have information exchanged wirelessly between those different entities in your kitchen, or between your vehicle and your car, or between your vehicle and the other vehicles on the road around it, and the beacons and sensors embedded in the road. The information is going to be created, transmitted, aggregated, and acted upon at many nodes outside that central hub. That would be done for efficiency the same way environmental and climate devices and energy devices on the grid are going to be talking to the substations and the transformers about energy flows in the grid, the electric grid. And you're going to have a system that is much more decentralized than where the important activities are taking place. That's huge for defensive protection. It's also huge for the national security apparatuses, be they law enforcement or others, who are trying to collect information, understand what's happening, or to pursue specific types of individuals. Artificial intelligence, another key issue, because these smart devices are going to be learning. They're going to be learning from the baseline that they start with, and they're going to be learning from the activities of everything else happening around them. Think about how a human child or the chimpanzee inductively learns about the world around them. Okay, whether it's the acquisition of language, or whether it's just what standard operating procedures are. The way a child develops cultural awareness to know how to behave in certain settings, your devices are going to start contextually learning and then making decisions. Now, if those devices are accepting information, compiling it and acting upon it, if you are able to determine what information is injected, you may be able to manipulate and influence the ultimate activity of that node, and possibly in ways which could cause adverse effects systemically, even beyond that specific node. Clearly behind all of this is massive data aggregation and data science, and clearly there are different countries and different industries who are all working very heavily to be leaders in that realm. Augmented reality, I'm very glad that was mentioned in the last discussion, because whether it's a human decision maker or an automated decision maker, with what certainty do they have that the information they're receiving and acting upon is actually accurate? To use Misha's example, is there a door in the wall or not? Now, for his engineering purposes, it's great to be able to put a bunch of different doors there and see how they look, see how they affect the structural integrity. But if you're a combatant commander, or if you're a stock investor, you want to know if there's a door there or not, because that will matter to your decision. And if someone else is able to give you images or give you sensory perceptions, which may or may not be accurate, how do you deal with that? The other issue we talked a lot about actually in the last 2 years of the annual threat assessment is actually this data integrity issue and who may choose to be manipulating data. Most people who talk about cybersecurity today talk about denial of service, meaning you are denied access to your own information. We saw that with the United States banking sector a lot back in 2012 and 2013. And they also talk about what I would call espionage, where someone unauthorized breaks in and takes a copy of your information, whether it's your personal health records, whether it's your passwords for something, whether it's U.S. government information like the Office of Personnel Management database, which was compromised. They leave you your copy, but they take a copy that they're not authorized to have. I offer that theft of information and the denial of service activity are actually the junior varsity games. The varsity and the collegiate level game is actually data manipulation and integrity of information. Why do I say that? As an Intel professional, I really had 2 questions I was supposed to try to be answering for my customers. 1, do we have a problem? And 2, what do we do when we realize we have a problem if we have one? So let's take an example that's regularly used in some of the media and the literature about someone taking different kinds of malware or electronic pulse weapons and turning off the New York Stock Exchange. Anyone ever heard of stories or conjectures sort of like that? A lot of them get discussed in the media. Well, let's think about that. If all the screens of the New York Stock Exchange went dark, you've solved the first half of my problem as an intelligence officer because I know I have a problem. The second question, do we know what to do when we have a problem? What happens every business trading day at 4 p.m. in New York? It closes. Does Western capitalism end at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time? No, you either trade in other markets, you trade over the counter. You know what to do. For me, the nightmare scenario is where you find out that a certain trade didn't clear, or that the trades that cleared were actually not the bids that were put in the same temporal order. Okay? Think about it. You got devices which are picking up GPS signals and time-stamping everything. What if the timestamps weren't accurate? What if that billion-dollar trade went to this gentleman instead of to this lady? And you didn't find out right away. But instead, she then traded her position with the lady in the back, and et cetera, et cetera. 6 months later, you find out the timestamps have been manipulated. Can you walk that back in your financial system? No. This is the systemic implication, potential, of playing in the integrity of the information. That's why we keep pointing out this is a significant concern. That's from the perspective of my prior job, okay? I want to now look at the big picture implications of some of this technology stuff, and you'll still see the flavor of where I'm coming from in my professional capacity. But I already mentioned that I think we're just coming to that need in the exponential curve. I believe the second-order derivative of change is increasing. Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the wildest ride human civilization's ever seen. Where the biological sciences are going, and thank you, Dave, the discussion of encoding DNA and actually putting in desired genes, which you can then use as triggers in living animals. Fantastic. Here's a living animal, too. He knows we've been talking about it. Anyone see the NOVA special memory hackers? If not, look it up on YouTube. You probably want to show it to your classes. They use the exact same mechanism that David was talking about for the photosensitivity from the allergy genes, and they put it into mice, and they use it to turn on and off behavioral patterns in mice by shining a light into the mouse's brain. Totally fascinating. The show is called Memory Hackers, and it's on NOVA, and it's got some great clips. Again, obeying copyright laws and stuff, but I think those programs are often developed for educational purposes. Then you have the information technology world, which is where I focused, and whether it's in the hardware, where we're actually getting down to molecular level transistors and gateways. There's actually another student who's gone to RSI who works at MITRE, and with others who've actually been doing some of that world-leading work. And then you get to the manufacturing side. Okay, 3D, 4D printing, we heard a little bit about that. When 3D printing started out, you could make fun shapes. How many of you know they 3D printed a playable violin? How many of you know they have printed human ears with human tissue? And they're close to getting a human kidney that you can pick the individual's DNA you want to be in it. Think about the organ transplant business. Seriously. I mean, the cusp we're on is absolutely amazing with genetic engineering, coding, being able to connect with prosthetic limbs, the carbon-based neural interface from the organism to the silica base of the prosthetic limbs to have those signals conducted and move the limb. This is really fascinating stuff when you look at the synergies between these areas of science, and that's part of the reason the exponential joyride is about to start, because these things have been in separate pillars of technological innovation are going to start leveraging with each other even more than before. I've been down to Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, and what's fascinating with the printing is they're now printing at a molecular level, and instead of just that white and black plastic-like substrate, they're putting in different materials, including metals. You can get conductivity in materials that you never would have had before because you can actually be putting that metallic thread in it from the start. I've held a titanium lattice ball they made that they've actually affected, at an engineering level, it bounces better than a super ball just because of the way they've put the configuration together. They're also able to affect the material science aspect of things. Again, for conductivity, for elasticity. What is happening when you can print at a molecular level? When you can change genes and genomes at a specific base pair level? This is absolutely fascinating. Now, coming back from that a little to where I am, all these problems become cyber issues. Why do I say that? The physical real-world interface, let's take biometrics for example. I may do an iris scan of one of you in the field, but I don't save that analog anymore. I don't save fingerprints on 3x5 paper cards at the FBI one. It's all digitized. So the information and communication technology of everything is really where then the activity is done. In my business or in law enforcement, we talk about conceal and reveal. You want someone to be able to pass through an airport gateway without being on a watch list, or being on a watch list and getting revealed. Or you want someone to have authorized access to a system based on their biometric. Think about it. If you're not taking the ink print finger of the person every single time, you're matching them to a database. I offer every single biometric challenge turns into a cybersecurity challenge that's really just about manipulating the reference database. Think about the nation of India, which has national identity cards and the national identity registration. They now have over 1 billion people registered biometrically in their national ID database. Think about what you can do with data science on a set like that if you want to study all different kinds of things. This is the world we're moving towards. I find it fascinating. I find it scary. I try not to be the doomsday sayer because I think there's so much opportunity available. I was in a conversation at a conference with General Hayden. He used to be the director of both NSA and CIA, and he was offering that the technology shift we're seeing is probably akin to the acquisition of language by primates. I said, that's fascinating. I tend to think about it a little different, but it goes to the same point that General Hayden was making. I say it's like the command of fire, because, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but this may be the second time in human history that we are going to be able to change the human organism based on scientific discovery. When you got command of fire, you changed your gastrointestinal tract. It probably had knock-on implications for blood types and all kinds of other stuff. But you're about to be able to change yourself as an organism. That's fascinating, that's exciting. There's a philosophical side of this, there's legals and all kinds of concerns. But the young people who you're teaching, this is going to be the reality of their world. And I'll finish on a philosophical point here in a few minutes, but this is entirely different than the world that any of us grew up in. So I do want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, because that's part of what I've been asked to, and it is my focus. But I'd like to, instead of just giving you a list of events, and anyone wants to talk about stuff, you can ask Q&A on specific things. But I want to talk about how we taught the White House and the American National Institute to think about the problem. Because I think that's the real issue here. And if you're teaching young people, they're seeing cybersecurity on the news every day. They're hearing about ransomware attacks on hospitals. They're hearing about all kinds of stuff. How should they think about it? So here's a couple suggestions. I was recently invited to give a keynote speech in Tokyo at a conference on international cybersecurity. Being an American and not following instructions well, I decided to give a speech on global information risk. And why did I change all three words of what they had asked me to talk about? Number one, it's not national or international, because I do not believe sovereign nations are in the driver's seat on this. In the United States, I think Silicon Valley is creating functionality, and Washington regulators are trying their best to keep up. Why did I say information instead of cyber? First off, cyber is a 1940s engineering term for the cybernetic theory of decision making. In the 80s, it got used in fiction literature, and somehow it became a popular claim, and to me it means anything and everything anyone wants it to, and anything and everything anyone doesn't want it to. To me, it's a hollow fiction term. What we're really talking about in the infrastructure is information and communication technologies, of which the internet is a portion, certainly not coextensive. And we're talking about information. Silly sophomoric example here. I want to send a cookie recipe to my friend. It's going to start out going over the internet as an electromagnetic pulse, pick wave or electron, whatever you like, and it gets there. Is that helpful at all to that person at that point? Not yet. It then gets processed through their network and it's zeros and ones in binary. Does that have any nutritional value? Does that taste any good? It then gets put through their Microsoft Word application. Now they're looking on their monitor at the written recipe. Not taking care of your hunger yet? You print it out. That paper taste any good? No, you actually have to take that information that's transmitted and operationalize it. Act on it. There is value to information, and this takes us back to the discussion about why we said integrity of information is going to be the leading security threat. Because integrity of information attacks the value of the information to the user, not just its accessibility, not just its propagation and transmission. So it's information and the value to act on it, whether you are a president, a prime minister, a CEO, an investor, a military commander. Can you believe what you're seeing, hearing, touching? And can you act on it more effectively than whoever your competitor is? And if you're a doctor doing remote surgery around the world, your competitor is the pathogen or the malady. Okay, this isn't always in a national security perspective. But we're having remote surgery across continents now. What is the certainty that what the surgeon is seeing is fully accurate? These are the kind of concerns that I've been worried about, and that systemically as a society we need to be thinking about. One of my mantras for many years is that most information security practices protect the naive from the unsophisticated. If someone has the resources and the desire, they will get into your network. Okay? It depends on who you are and what you have and who wants it. But this is why I do not accept the word security. I push for the word risk mediation, risk management, and resiliency. Because to think you will ever be 100% secure is absolutely foolish. Okay? Most of you probably have a lock on your front door at your home. Who do you think that keeps out? Teenage vagrants? Drunkards? Raise your hand if you think that lock on your front door is going to keep out a foreign intelligence service, or a professional criminal, or a narco-trafficking cartel. Okay? Think about cybersecurity the same way. It's a cost-benefit trade-off that our society has to make of what is the appropriate level of functionality and security. Okay, what's the only way to be perfectly safe? Abstinence. That's usually not that much fun or efficient, depending on what your mission is. So if you're going to connect to the internet, if you want to be doing e-commerce, you're going to have to be, you're not going to be abstaining, so the question is how do you manage that risk? And that's an individual decision for people, enterprises, governments, and global society. We have that conversation in most areas of our life, whether it's environmental hazards and pollution levels, whether it's traffic safety. In the United States, we accept 30,000 traffic deaths a year so that we can have efficient international, interstate commerce and drive more than 1 mile an hour not wearing a giant marshmallow safety suit. I could get you 0 traffic deaths, but as a society, we've decided we don't want 0 traffic deaths. For some reason, when it comes to terrorism and cybersecurity, we've decided we never want to see the blue screen of death, and we never want to have a cybersecurity problem. That's actually highly irrational. I'm not going to stand before you and tell you what the right balance is. I'm going to say we have to have a mature conversation to figure out what that balance is. With the technologists, with the members of society who might be that analog of the traffic death, and figure out what we want to do. But to pretend, more mathematical curves, to pretend you're going to get that asymptote to 0 is ridiculous. Any economist will tell you you do not want to live in a society with absolute 0 crime, because of what would have to be done in a marginal return on the loss of your privacy and freedom to make sure that absolutely no crimes ever committed. Right? You will never get to 0 cybersecurity risk. How do you manage the risk that exists? That's the question. One example I really like, and this audience will probably appreciate it, is the organismal biology example. We all left our house today. How many of your bodies thought they were not going to encounter a pathogen today? None of you. Your body expected to get inundated with probably millions. Yet it has a plan for resiliency to keep its core function going. There'll be some days where you won't be operating at 100%. But the objective is to keep your core mission going, knowing you're going to be degraded or assaulted most days. That is the correct way to think about cybersecurity. Not, I bought a firewall, I've completed this compliance checklist, therefore I must be safe. Compliance has little or no correlation in my mind with security in cyberspace. I don't think that Cyber Pearl Harbor or Cyber Armageddon is what we should be expecting. Obviously, we want to prevent it. But I think the problem is already upon us. And Director Clapper has testified similarly, based on our advice and counsel to him, that what's already happening in the economic espionage marketplace, what's already happening in the cyber attack space on a lot of companies, is already degrading economic competitiveness and national security interests in our countries and many others. Don't look for the giant blinding white flash in cyberspace. Look at the death by 100 punches or 1,000 paper cuts, because you're already being negatively impacted by a transaction cost and inefficiency. I think the role of the private sector is central and increasing. I was in a speech with a large industry audience, and a lady who was co-presenting with me said that there were really only 3 critical infrastructure sectors that mattered: telecom, finance, and energy, and all the others were really dependent and derivative off of those. I may or may not subscribe to the way she presented it, so that's not my quote. But speaking after her, I said, if she's right, ask yourself, at least in the United States, who operates energy, telecommunications, and financial systems? The private sector. Some of those industries are regulated, or they're all regulated to some degree. But the U.S. government is not giving every single instruction about functionality and day-to-day operations, and it is not under U.S. government control. And the same is true in many countries around the world. So the private sector is inherently a central part of this. And let's talk about that private sector. Let's talk about the current business model for the tech companies. How many have a Hotmail or a Gmail? How many have a webmail account? How much you pay for that this month? 0. Wrong answer. How did you pay for that account this month? With your data. If you're not paying for it, you're paying for it. It's a different business model. And that is their right. You've all signed the user agreements. You've made a contract to sell your data for their service. Back to the big data science discussions we were having earlier and the automated decision making. And you guys heard the story about the teenage lady whose family found out she was pregnant because Target started sending her diaper coupons and other things to her house. She hadn't told her parents. We've done a couple of Google searches and other things with the products of Target. Target figured it out. How many of you know that search engine searches for thermometer and temperature are almost as good as the Center of Disease Control for tracking the spread of diseases in the United States? Okay? This is the world we're moving towards, of ubiquitous information and processing, and we haven't even in place all the Internet of Things sensors yet. What's it going to be like 36 months from now? Talked about data integrity and manipulation. One unfortunate example from a few years back. Remember when the Associated Press's Twitter account got hacked and a message went out that there had been an explosion at the White House and Obama had been injured? False information. But it affected the U.S. financial markets for about 5 minutes. I think the Dow Jones moved something like 140 points. The fraudulent nature of that tweet was uncovered and publicized in the market. The value came back in the marketplace. Most people stopped the story there. From my vantage point, I asked the question, was the money in the same pockets 5 minutes later than it was 5 minutes earlier? Did it go back to the exact same accounts? That answer is absolutely not. You had a massive, multi-billion-dollar redistributive event instigated by the Syrian Electronic Army. Now, I do not believe they themselves directly profited. It didn't go into their bank accounts. I think it moved between large investor funds and things. But that's problematic when you think about the value of information. In that case, those were all legal, legitimate trades. Because investors, including those who set up automated trading algorithms that operate in milliseconds, are allowed to determine what they trade on based on whatever information they find valuable. A lot of companies find Associated Press tweets to be valuable. In this case, a fraudulent activity produced a fake one. If you think about the systemic implications of all these things and where our world is going, it's an exciting, it's a fascinating time to be, but there's also going to be security and other concerns that come with it. So I think we got a few minutes left here. So let me give you some of my thoughts on the future of cybersecurity and interoperability. If any of you still have cash in your pockets, cash is interesting because it enables you to move economic value or financial value through time and space. You don't have to take all your crops and save them for 3 years and then take them to another country. And when you're dealing with cash, you've had for 3 years, that's pretty much what you do. Whatever your business or profession is, it generated your value. Money lets you move value through time and space. Information lets you move knowledge through time and space. Back to my cookie recipe. Okay? So put it in that context, when we think about interoperability in this global information risk space that I'm talking about. At the security level, there's been a lot of questions of if sovereign competition is going to turn us into a bunch of walled gardens and balkanization. If you're in the international security discourse, there's a lot of literature on this. And I break interoperability down into 3 categories. Physical connectivity. Are there actually pipes going between A and B? Almost every country wants those to exist. Second is there technical functionality that can translate? Or are the two groups working on different standards? For example, in centuries past, it was a willful decision by the Russian Empire to have a different railroad gauge than their Germanic Western neighbors. They had learned some lessons from previous wars and didn't want the military materiel rolling straight through. So you had to have points where you transferred and changed from one standard to another. That, of course, had economic inefficiencies because other desirable merchantable products didn't roll easily either. Most nations today want technical functionality, and even those who don't, there's usually private sector entities creating the fixes or the apps or the interfaces to translate between the different standards. The roundhouse between the two different rail systems. So what are we left with? We're left with political and economic regulation. What we're seeing in this space, whether it's data localization calls from Latin America a couple of years ago, whether it's privacy issues from the European Union a year back, we're seeing people want control of the information. The equivalent of toll booths and passport control desks. Yes, you can transit, as long as we get to inspect you and determine you're what we want. And if we can, we'll probably tax or charge you along the way. So I think interoperability will exist, but I think you'll see pushes for sovereign regulation when possible. I think you're going to see the continued and accelerated convergences of devices. There's a point when everyone in this room probably owned a camera, a laptop or a desktop, maybe a PDA, remember Palm Pilots, and a phone. I have one, probably, maybe 2. You're going to have convergence of device. You're going to have convergence of networks, and you're going to have continued convergence with protocols of those that are running it. TCP/IP, IPv6 seems to be leading the way and winning. And the whole world is going to be on this. You know that there are more mobile phone subscriptions in sub-Saharan Africa, I believe, than there are houses with electricity in several countries? That's huge. They've leapfrogged a part of industrialization. And cloud security. If you do not own fully proprietarily your own cloud server system, there may be very good reasons to not. I will simply tell you that you have outsourced your physical security, your personnel security, your information security, and your critical infrastructure protection. Okay, Sean, what are you saying? You just rattle off a bunch of things. When I talk to industry audiences, I look at the CEO and I say, so you have a dynamically distributed cloud provider where you store your corporate data. That's lovely, and it's probably a very efficient and economical annual subscription. As your chief security officer, go on and check the lock on the chain link fence around the transformer that supplies the energy to the server farm in whatever country it is that the company you've contracted with stores your data in. And oh, by the way, that country may be changing each day if it's a dynamic cloud. If their eyes haven't glazed over, they look at me and they go, oh. Now, it all depends on what you're trying to protect. If you're a mom and pop bakery, making those cookies, maybe you don't need to worry about this. If you're a defense contractor, you think you should worry about it? If your company is based on information resources and intellectual property, you think you should worry about it? Maybe that's a decision for each enterprise. Privacy and identity is where I'm going to leave you with. Privacy. I love it when someone wins the lottery. We get those exciting TV things for like a week of, we can't find the lottery winner. That's great advertising. Because we can find the lottery winner if we want to find them. It was bought at a gas station or a drugstore. We know the time that it was produced from the system. From the vehicles that were at that store, the cell phones that were in the store, the credit card that was used in the store. We know who was in the store. It's a matter of talking to 3 or 4 people who were in that 7-Eleven in wherever the heck, Iowa, at 13:22 on Tuesday the 15th. And by the way, we probably filmed them on the CCTV camera. And it makes for great advertising because we love the human interest story side of things. And I'll leave you with identity. We talked about, or at least I did, that I think this is a monumental inflection point in the history of human society and the human organism. I also think philosophically it's an inflection point in our view of the self. I saw a lovely ad in Washington, D.C. yesterday of a former Marine who had been injured in combat and had 2 prosthetic limbs. Ladies, he also had a great 6-pack. And he was doing a jockey shorts ad. This is now in society one of the views of the human form. There was a movie with Johnny Depp where they downloaded his memory. We can now capture your brain waves and record them. Do you have the IP over that data set? Legal question. Is it assault on a human being if you hit their prosthetic limb rather than their carbon-based limb? You're going to have social, philosophical, legal questions to go with all these technological innovations. Please, bring some of this higher contextual thinking to the very nuts and bolts of the science you're teaching. And I say that for 2 reasons. To prepare them for a world that's much different from the one that we all grew up in, and to keep their interest and their excitement. I offer that you can probably teach each day of science class in conjunction with a front page news story. That's fun. That keeps the interest. And hopefully, whether it's for the teachers and the students, this continued STEM discussion will be fascinating and create tomorrow's leaders, as well as everyone who can operate safely in that society. Thank you for your attention. I hope this has been interesting. I have time for Q&A. If not, Natasha allows us. I don't know exactly where we're going.